You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. This week there will be a sad anniversary, which was the first anniversary of the attack on the London Muslim family. We'll talk to Imam Abdulfatah Tawakal. But first, some news headlines. Muslim groups demand NHL act on anti-Arab violence. Pakistani Muslim woman vies for mayoral title in Winnipeg. Quebec Muslims disappointed over parole date for mosque shooter. Muslim Scholars Union demand international action to defend Al-Aqsa Mosque. And now the details. Arab and Muslim groups are calling on the National Hockey League to implement a lifelong ban on racist fans after Canadian player Nazem Kadri was targeted over social media. The Canadian Arab Institute and the National Council of Canadian Muslims on Thursday issued a joint statement. They list a number of racist slurs and death threats the Colorado Avalanche hockey player has received during the playoffs. Posts refer to London, Ontario-born Kadri as an Arab scum, towelhead, and terrorist. A spokesperson with the council says racism and discrimination has no place in sports and says the NHL should, quote, do the right thing. Former provincial Liberal leader Rana Bokhari is now a contender in Winnipeg's mayoral race. Bokhari is set to run against 8 other mayoral candidates for the upcoming October election. In an interview with media sources, Bokhari says she wants to help the city grow after the pandemic. Her aim is to be her authentic self, which she says is a Pakistani Muslim woman, while focusing on the environment, the community, and the economy. Bokhari was Manitoba Liberals' first female minority leader and their youngest. She resigned in 2016 after her loss to the New Democrats. Muslims in Quebec are left with mixed feelings after the case of the 2017 mosque shooter draws to a close. The Supreme Court ruled Friday to set the parole date at 25 years for the gunman that left 6 dead and 19 injured in a Quebec City mosque. The Islamic Cultural Centre of Quebec says the court did not account for the racist nature of the attack. They add that the victims and their families are worried the gunman will be free after a brief stay in jail. Though they were disappointed with the decision, the mosque's co-founder says they are ready to move on and focus on the future. The International Union of Muslim Scholars has called on Muslim nations and their leaders to defend Al-Aqsa Mosque after incursions into the Flashpoint area. The Union's Secretary General said Sunday evening that the first praying direction, or the Qibla, should be defended. The statement came as thousands of Israeli settlers staged a flag march on Sunday to mark what they call the Day of Unifying Jerusalem. This refers to Israel's 1967 occupation of East Jerusalem. Israel annexed the entire city in 1980 in a move never recognized by the international community. And that's it for the news. London Muslims are preparing for what will be a sad day to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the murder of a family that was killed while out for a walk. I'd like to take a moment just to memorize them. Talat Afzal, Salman Afzal, Madiha Salman, and Yumna Afzal. To talk to us today about the upcoming ceremonies, we have with us Imam Abdulfatah Tawakal. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Can you take us back to that sad day, June 6th? What do you remember?
I mean, on that eventful day, it was actually towards the evening in which the attack took place. But it was the day after in terms of the community response that really is memorable just because of how things unfolded after the attack had taken place, and then how quickly and coordinated the community response was, followed by just the outpouring of support that we received.
I'd like to ask you more about that in a moment, but let's just go over what actually happened in case someone watching isn't aware of the details. If you could share with us the story.
So on the evening of June the 6th, the family were out for a walk, as they usually do. And so they were walking along Hyde Park on their way back home. And when they were standing at the intersection of Hyde Park and South Carriage, there was an individual who came and ran them over with his truck at a very high speed, killing 4 of the 5 family members and injuring the 9-year-old boy who was the only survivor of the attack. The police immediately announced the following day that this was hate motivated. This was an attack on the family based on their faith, because they were visibly identifiable as Muslim, and so they were attacked because of that.
Were you involved in the funeral preparations?
Yes, in terms of the response, in terms of dealing with this on a community-wide level, I was involved with many of the different events that took place during that week. So initially there was a press conference that took place alongside with the London Police Services. There were faith leaders who taped a video that was a community response the day after the attack, and just in terms of helping our community process the gravity of what actually transpired.
It's not only the London Muslim community that's been trying to process. I think this has reverberated right across Canada. I mean, even myself, that when I went out for a walk in the weeks following, I was sometimes scared if a car approached when I was crossing over a street. Can you talk a little bit about how this has impacted the Muslim community?
It did indeed impact the Muslim community. I mean, even, for myself and my wife, I actually live on the same street in which the attack happened, and my wife and I were out on a walk that evening when the attack happened. But we simply took a different route than continuing along Hyde Park. And the very next day, once the community heard about this, I received multiple questions from community members, and especially those who are visibly Muslim, from our sisters who wear hijab and whatnot, asking me, is it safe? Can we get together with our friends? I had a meeting that was going to be with my friends, and this is my wife saying this, and I had other sisters who were asking me the same thing, that, can we still get together at a park for, just joining or being with one another? Even just going out for walks. It shook the Muslim community, and everyone was having the same thoughts in their minds in terms of, do I have to look over my shoulder, being concerned about someone that could possibly want to do another similar type of attack.
So you have to process not only your own personal and your family response, but to take on all the community that's calling you. How did you answer those kinds of questions? How did you answer those kinds of questions?
So we responded by saying that, we should be, vigilant and take the proper precautions, but at the same time, we should not live in a state of fear, because that is not, something that one is in terms of our faith, and we rely a lot in terms of how it is that we understand these things. They happen, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's based on our response in terms of, how do we deal with things and cope with matters. And our faith definitely has a major part in that. So we also understand that this is something that is considered as an anomaly. It is not a regular occurrence. This is something that, although we were, in terms of the gravity of it, we did not expect something of this to happen to that level or that degree of in terms of its gravity. But at the same time, we weren't surprised in the sense that there are racist or discriminatory elements within our community. And this is something that, is a long-term plan in terms of addressing these things. They're real. Systemic discrimination is real. Islamophobia is real. And we need to now, take the steps to put in place measures that are going to combat the various forms of hatred that exist, whether it's online or whether it's within the community through efforts in terms of education. All of these are long-term efforts that need to be done. And,
so when you talk about systemic racism, there are indications that sometimes the police themselves are systemically racist against Muslims. How satisfied have you been with the police response to the attack and what happened?
So, I mean, locally, with the London Police Service, they themselves are willing to have this conversation about, systemic racism that exists, and they have, for example, a diversity officer who's actually a member of our community, and so these are difficult conversations to have, but they're very willing to have it. In terms of the response for this particular incident, the response has actually been very cooperative from the London Police Services, very much from the very beginning, in terms of communicating with the Muslim community, doing things that otherwise police services wouldn't necessarily do, just in order to help us navigate the situation, which is very challenging.
Can you give us an example of something that they did that they wouldn't normally do?
So, for example, the morning after the attack, I received a phone call along with many other Muslim community leaders to tell us about what transpired, and they actually called for a meeting at the London Muslim Mosque to be able to inform us of what they knew about the attack and what they were able to tell us up until that point. And that would be as a means to help prepare the community for a press conference that was going to take place later on in that day. So this is not something that the police services would usually do in terms of being able to talk about beforehand the details of what they knew had taken place, because they understood the gravity of the situation. And one of the first things that I was told is there's something horrific that happened, and this is going to make international headlines.
That seems very comforting, that to have that kind of support.
It is, and it's ongoing. We have a good working relationship with the local police services, and I myself serve as a volunteer chaplain with the London Police Services, and the diversity officers I'd already mentioned is the first Muslim sergeant with the police service, and it's just the level of cooperation, and even for the events that are going to be taking place, these things would not be able to happen without ongoing conversations and cooperation with the local police service, just from a logistic perspective.
Well, we're almost out of time, and just very briefly, in about 30 seconds, tell us about some of the events that are planned for the upcoming commemoration.
So on June the 5th, which is the day before the one-year commemoration, there's going to be a march that is organized by the youth within our community. That is going to take place. There are going to be some speakers coming, big speakers that will be addressing the crowd, and this march is going to take place from the high school, starting at the high school where Yumna attended, and go to the London Muslim Mosque. The day of the attack on June the 6th, 1 year commemorating that, there's going to be a prayer service in the morning. There's going to be a community garden that has been established by the City of London, an unveiling. There will be a memorial unveiling at the actual location of the attack itself, and there's going to be a vigil that will be taking place that evening, and then the following days there are going to be workshops on Islamophobia offered to the community in order to be able to help better educate on this issue.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you for stepping in and sharing with us what you remember and what's upcoming. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Thank you for watching Canadian Muslim News. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe, and God bless.